The comic book movie genre and I are in a very weird spot these days where it seemed like the second the clock hit midnight and we entered 2017, something just broke in the back of my mind that made me almost groan-inducingly not want to watch any more comic book adaptations. And it's hard not to understand that because they have become so prevalent in the industry. So many of the biggest and most important films every year are comic book movies. Some of the most important television series so far are also been comic book movies. And there's going to be even more of them going forward. And so there are only really two directions when you hit a breaking point like that. Either you quit entirely, or the genre has to do interesting or actually really good quality things to keep you going. And in spite of this fatigue that I've been feeling, the genre has really proven itself for me with the likes of Lego Batman and Logan. Both of these were movies that were actually movies, not commercials, not extensions that are mandatory pieces to a big shared universe. They were just films that the people who made them wanted to make, and they did a quality job of making them. And they were very much about a lot of the similar things that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is about fatherhood, about family, even of the adopted kind, and the importance of both in the development of the people participating in it. And when you have a third movie like this that very much feels like kind of a thematic extension of what the previous two set up, even if they're in completely different universes, that does kind of stack the odds against the favor of the last one to arrive. And Guardians of the Galaxy does definitely have the things stacked against it in that regard, because Logan and Lego Batman do so many things right. And Logan itself is a very comparable movie to Guardians of the Galaxy 2 in what it's trying to achieve, that Guardians 2 needed to do a lot of great things to not only justify its own existence, but to make itself a comparable film to the aforementioned Batman and Logan movies. And I was hearing some interesting things about it from the spoilers that I read. The Guardians 2 had that thing like the first movie where the trailers were really not doing it for me, but I really like the first one still. I consider it to be one of the best MCU flicks that's come out. And so I was not surprised by the fact that the trailers for Guardians Volume 2 just do it for me, because even the first ones just gave me kind of a bad impression of the film. So I read some of the spoilers, and I was seeing some really interesting stuff, like how the movie was a lot more similar to Logan than I ever would have expected of an MCU movie, where the majority of it is very small scale, how it very much is focused on the characters and what they're doing, how it kind of tries to avoid a lot of the not just MCU tropes, but a lot of blockbuster movie tropes. And the stuff I was seeing about Ego was genuinely interesting. So I was really excited to see where this movie was going to go, how it would deal with the same, themes of fatherhood and family, like Lego Batman and Logan did, but with its own James Gunn spin. And after watching the film, I was freaking flabbergasted by how demonstrably horrible it is. I have not seen a movie so broken on so many fundamentally different ways, a movie that constantly undermines itself with so many bad creative decisions that I was left wondering, what the hell was I smoking when I saw the first movie and liked it years ago? This is the kind of sequel that makes you want to go back and watch the original, but not in a good way, in a way that makes you wonder, what the actual fuck did I see in the first one if the same creative people were able to make something as obnoxious as this thing? And the first big issue with the film is that this does not feel like a movie. This feels like a mediocre 10-episode TV show that got cut to pieces and then edited into a 2-hour film. And the reason why you're easily going to notice this is because every character has its own subplot, and the movie tries to kind of tie them back together, but the third act is a monstrosity of its own that I'm going to get into down the line. But so disjointed are the various storylines present here, so without focus are they, that it does feel like somebody just made a television script of 10 episodes and then just cut the shit out of it and then put it all together into a 2-hour film. Like the stuff that Peter does with Ego barely has anything to do with what the Rocket does with Yondu, or what Gamora does with Nebula, or what Drax does with Mantis. And like I said, the movie tries to like bring all these disparate elements together in a climax, but that climax ultimately destroys what little virtues the film had going for it in an attempt to be like, oh yeah, we set up all these dominoes and now we're knocking them down. Well, yeah, you're knocking them down, all right. You're knocking them down way into the pits of freaking hell, son. And the big problem, and the most comparable story structure film that I can find to Guardians 2 is BVS. And I'm just mentioning that movie here is going to make several people ram down my throat. But here's the thing that BVS did. BVS was a movie that spent like 2 hours in the ultimate cut just having characters do stuff that without much of a plot. But here's why it didn't annoy the shit out of me. For one, the movie was actually doing interesting things with the characters. And two, the movie had a central pillar that everything revolved around it. Everything in that movie happens because of Man of Steel, and everything happens because of Superman. Everything Batman does is because of Superman. Everything Lex does for Superman. Lois for Superman. Superman, half for Superman and half for Batman. Like, there are central pillars that exist in that film that make it work, and the movie did not make the character stuff obnoxious as all freaking hell to watch the way Guardians of the Galaxy 2 does. Guardians 2 does not have this central pillar. It literally is like a bunch of different mini-series for all of these characters that were filmed separately being trying to get smashed together and brought awkwardly together in a big climactic final act, which was probably some of the most boring shit Hollywood has done when it comes to like a Hollywood blockbuster conclusion. So that's already a really big problem. But like I said, if you're doing interesting things with the characters, I could care about there being barely any plot or story up until the third act. But it doesn't do this. And this is probably one of the best examples I've seen of how you should not evolve your cast going forward. Because the reason I like the cast in Guardians 1 is because they were majoritively down-to-earth people. They felt like real people. They were people that had like weird personality quirks. Like Peter Quill was the guy who was maybe like a bit more obsessed with sex, or he was more obsessed with pop culture. Or Drax was the guy who was a bit too literal for his own good, and that's why he was, funny, able to be funny and, an actual person. Rocket Raccoon was like this little sociopathic animal, but he had other layers to him, and he kind of resents the people who made him. He resents the fact that people treat him like a lesser being because he is a raccoon, of course. And they all had identifiable personality quirks that made them unique from one another, but they were not caricatures. Everybody in Guardians 2, besides Gamora, feels like a blatant caricature of themselves. If Drax was a bit oblivious to like social norms from like outside people, he is a pants-shitting retard in this film. He literally does some of the stupidest things I have ever seen. And not even things where you're like, oh, well, Drax is too literal, so of course he wouldn't get it. Like, no! Drax does some literally stupid stuff that a mentally deficient 8-year-old would do. A person who takes things too literally is not this stupid. He is just a person who doesn't get analogies, but good luck trying to tell James freaking Gunn that, because he's too busy making a caricature of his own character who he helped define in the first film. If Rocket was sometimes a bit sociopathic, that's literally almost everything his character is and does in this movie. If Peter Quill made a couple pop culture references, expect him to hammer that shit into your skull by the end of the film. Like, why is Gamora the only person who feels like a down-to-earth evolution of who she was in the first movie? Like Rocket doesn't feel like an evolution. Drax feels like a completely different character. Peter Quill does basically nothing. And speaking of Star-Lord, the problem with Peter Quill in this movie is that Chris Pratt has bought into his own hype. He does the same thing that Robert Downey Jr. has done for half of his appearances in the MCU, where he's just like, oh, you'll all love me. You'll love me anyway. I'm Chris Pratt. You'll unconditionally suck my dick. And he barely gives a performance in this movie. There may be like a couple of scenes where Pratt actually tries, but when your protagonist, for all purposes, is just reacting to everything with the same expression of eye-bulging befuddlement and barely present wit. That is a problem. A guy who's meeting his dad for the first time should not be having the same reaction he does when he's like exchanging sarcastic banter with Rocket. Like, Pratt does not give a damn throughout this movie. And so we have a movie that doesn't have a structure, that has obnoxious characters, and what are we left with? Oh, we're left with even more pain and misery on the side of the audience, because the humor in this film is truly something to behold. Because every time people say that Marvel movies are too humorous, that they sacrifice good drama or good characterization or tension or all these elements that are important to making a story fucking work. When people say that about the Marvel movies, I've never entirely believed it. I've always felt that was really an exaggeration, which is something that comic book fans do a lot of the time. They exaggerate things where they just say, oh, well, this thing is like this, and then there's no nuance to anything. And nuance is an important aspect to Guardians 2, because Guardians kills its own nuance with the final act. But going back to the humor, this movie is all of those exaggerated complaints about the humor being very intrusive brought to the big screen. There is no scene without some kind of stupid, obnoxious gag in one way or another. It doesn't matter if the scene sets up something truly dramatic or something that truly shocks the audience, or you're like, wow, I can't believe we just have a scene where people are getting jettisoned into space and we're watching them die in the cold vacuum. And then immediately afterward, there's just this prolonged bit with Rocket, doing this stupid gag over and over and over and over and over again ad infinitum, because lols, we can't have the audience get invested in the film with anything through humor. We can't shock the audience with something dark. We can't have the characters actually take something seriously for more than 5 adjacent seconds, because it's a stupid space opera movie. Look, this is all bullshit. Why should you care about this dude called Drax the Destroyer, or this dude Star-Lord with his 80s references? Why should you care about these people? This whole thing is freaking dumb. Why should you care? And that's kind of the attitude this movie has. This movie literally feels like it almost borderline hates itself, where it goes out of its way to make fun of its own self, and to point out how stupid it is, and how stupid everybody in it is, and how stupid you should feel for even thinking of trying to get invested in it in a way beyond, lols, this movie made me laugh. So yeah, this movie basically treats you like Drax at the end of the day. It treats you like a pants-shitting retard throughout most of it, but it never lets up. There are so many scenes where I was like, why did you put this in? Why did you put this gag in? I was actually caring about what was happening in your film for a little bit. Why do you feel the need to put in so many jokes? And I wouldn't even care if the jokes were good, or if the jokes were trying to poke fun at the film in a smart way. This is some of the most generic, trite shit I've ever seen comedy-wise in a long time. There are so many things here that are so generic, so trite, so tired and wasted that even the freaking Deadpool movie never sinks so low. I owe the Deadpool movie an apology, because I thought that movie's comedy was severely overrated, but Deadpool looks like freaking comedy gold in comparison to this. So yeah. And it also does that Deadpool thing where they also extend the gag for way too long. There's literally a 5-minute sequence where Baby Groot does nothing but bring stuff to Rocket and Yondu in prison. Literally the same gag for 5 motherfucking minutes. It was barely funny the first time, and it's not funny when you do it 10 times in a row. And there are more examples, without spoiling the entire movie, there are more examples where the film is trying to set up a dramatic scene or something that should get you invested in the film beyond its capacity to make you laugh, and fail at making you laugh at that. But it falls flat. Imagine if Logan, in Logan, you had the scene with Laura and Wolverine after Charles is dead, and they just left the hospital, and then they're just like yelling at each other, having a true conversation for once, and then Wolverine's claws randomly pop out of his wrists, and they cut his dick off, and then we just spend 5 minutes with Laura screaming and Wolverine saying, oh my god, I cut my own dick off. That is the humor of this movie. That is the kind of structure, the kind of story integrity, I want to say, you can expect from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. But it gets worse. The final act is like if Logan had an Avengers or Man of Steel climax attached to it. Because for the first two, and oh god, even calling those acts is a sin against true story structure. Like, for the first 3/4 of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, the film is majoritively very, very small scale. Like, there isn't a lot of action in it, and it is, legitimately trying to be, like, more character-focused, even though it's failing on so many miserable levels, and it's making you miserable by extension. And then, imagine if at the end of Logan, a movie that had, a very similar story structure to that, instead of Logan ending with, like, this more intimate forest battle that's more brutal, that's more down-to-earth, and with, like, a more somber conclusion, you have, like I said, an Avengers or Man of Steel level destruction porn fest where the movie is trying to awkwardly pretend like, hey, we set all this up and now we're paying it off. No, motherfucker, you are not. You are killing what little story credibility you had through destroying Ego. And Ego is set up as a somewhat nuanced character. He's probably one of the few guys who actually kind of succeeds at being a true character and not a caricature. And the film completely sacrifices all of this for the sake of a stupid reveal that just turns him into a generic bad guy. So I could easily see the whole situation in the writing room as script was making when James Gunn was making the script for this, where he was like, I need a climax where Peter's going to kill his biological dad, but I don't want to make it nuanced because God for fucking bid there is nuance in anything in an MCU flick, especially this one. So instead of that, I'm gonna make Ego a truly irredeemable evil bastard for no good reason other than to justify Peter being okay with murdering his biological father. And in a movie that's supposed to be about family and the importance of family, I feel like that should be a bigger deal. Like, Ego should not just be a generic evil dude, an evil biological parent that the kid has to kill or defeat to save the world. Like, I really hate it when fiction does that. It really grates on my nerves. And the fact that they do it here to one of the few characters who had some honest-to-God potential, who was actually utilizing some of that potential, is mind-numbingly frustrating. And like I said, imagine if Logan ended with something like that, where you have an entire city getting blown up because all these other movies have a city being blown up, and so this one has to end like that too. Except no, Doctor Strange had a climax that wasn't a big destruction porn fest. Doctor Strange's climax is the climax that should have been in this movie, but because James Gunn is struggling between doing an actual character piece and a stupid cartoon thing, he eventually lets the stupid cartoon win out, and it destroys any legitimate potential the script and characters had. So, yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is one of the most frustratingly bad movies I've ever seen. Like, Rogue One was boring as all hell. Rogue One put me basically into a coma and made me loathe and despise the fact Star Wars even existed so it could spawn something like this. But Guardians either bored me or frustrated me. And when I'm bored, that adds to the frustration because I'm going to constantly notice things about your movie you're trying to hide through constant jokes that just don't make any sense. And it's just going to make me hate your movie even more because your jokes are falling flat and you're failing to distract me from seeing even more flaws which are even more present. And yeah, this movie treats you like you are Drax the Destroyer. It treats you like you are a pants-shitting retard who's going to find any fart or dick joke funny and that you're going to love the movie just based on that. Fuck character development, fuck getting invested in something beyond its capacity to make you laugh. You are a retard. Screw you. Give us your money. And like Michael Bay movies have nothing on this film. Michael Bay has never made a movie that has such a truly almost spiteful disdain for its own audience the way Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 does. And I say that with absolute sincerity. Oh yeah, and Baby Groot, he does fuck all. He's just a big Disney merchandise toy. Like if you were one of those people who thought Iron Man 3 having the kid in it was nothing but Disney pandering, if you watch this movie and you look me in the eye and tell me Baby Groot is not even worse, if not in fact the worst example of Disney pandering that's ever been in the MCU, you sir are a fucking moron and you need to go dive bomb off a cliff. So yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I can't believe they did this. I just don't. I'm done.